I still remember the day everything changed. I was sitting in a crowded auditorium, surrounded by people eager to hear a lecture titled "Stop Being Kind," the mystery speech. The room buzzed with curiosity as the speaker, a quiet figure dressed in a simple suit, stepped onto the stage. From the moment he opened his mouth, I sensed there was something different about him, something that made me want to lean forward and listen more closely. His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of urgency that hinted at secrets buried just beneath the surface. No one in that auditorium was quite prepared for what he was about to share. It wasn't a typical motivational talk about kindness or empathy. Instead, he spoke about how sometimes being too kind could cloud our judgment, weaken our resolve, or even lead us down a path where our own needs and dreams are overlooked. As he went on, a hush fell over the audience. People shifted uneasily in their seats, trying to reconcile his challenging words with their usual belief that kindness is start to see what he meant. He wasn't saying kindness was bad. He was saying that sometimes we use kindness as an excuse to avoid difficult truths. We stay in toxic relationships because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We say yes to things we don't want to do because we're afraid of seeming rude. We let people take advantage of us because we'd rather be seen as nice than stand up for ourselves. And as he spoke, I started to think about my own life in ways I hadn't before. The speaker paused, letting his words settle in. He scanned the room, making eye contact with different people as if he could see right through them. "How many times have you smiled when you didn't want to?" he asked. "How many times have you apologized for something that wasn't your fault? How many times have you kept quiet when you should have spoken up?" The silence in the room was deafening. No one wanted to admit it, but we all knew the answer. Too many times. He then shared a story about a friend of his, a man who was known for being the kindest person in every room. He always put others before himself, always made sure everyone else was comfortable, even if it meant sacrificing his own happiness. But one day, something changed. This man, who had spent his whole life being kind, found himself completely lost. He had given so much of himself away that there was nothing left. He wasn't happy, the speaker said. He wasn't fulfilled. And worst of all, the people he had been so kind to, they didn't even notice. They had gotten so used to taking from him that they never once stopped to ask if he was okay. I felt a chill run down my spine. How many of us were just like that? How many of us had mistaken kindness for self-sacrifice, thinking that if we just gave a little more, we'd finally be valued? The weight of the message was beginning to sink in, but the speaker wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice, forcing us to listen even more carefully. "What if I told you that being kind isn't always the right thing to do?" he said. "What if I told you that kindness, when given without limits, can destroy you?" The air in the room felt heavy. No one dared to move, waiting for him to explain what he meant. And that's when he said something that made my heart stop. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away." His words hung in the air like an unanswered question. Walk away. From what? From people? From responsibilities? From the very idea of being kind? My mind raced, and from the looks of the people around me, I wasn't the only one struggling to process it. Some people shifted in their seats, crossing their arms, as if rejecting the thought. Others leaned forward, their faces filled with curiosity, waiting for him to explain. The speaker let the silence stretch before he continued. "We've been taught since childhood that kindness is the answer to everything. That if we're patient enough, forgiving enough, giving enough, we can fix anything. But what if that's a lie? What if kindness has a limit?" His voice remained calm, but there was something unsettling about how certain he sounded. "What happens when you're kind to someone who only takes? What happens when your kindness is used against you?" I thought about people in my own life, the ones I had bent over backward for, the ones I had always been there for. The more I gave, the less I seemed to matter. The realization settled deep in my chest like a weight I hadn't noticed before. Looking around the room, I could see it in others too, the way some people's eyes darted downward, the way a few clenched their hands in their laps. He wasn't just talking about some abstract idea. He was talking about ***. The speaker continued, his voice steady but intense. "The hardest truth to accept is that not everyone deserves your kindness. Not everyone values it. Some people take it as weakness. And the worst part? The more you give, the more they expect. until one day you have nothing left, not even the strength to say no. A woman near the front swallowed hard. A man in the back exhaled sharply as if he had been holding his breath. The energy in the room was shifting. He was saying things most of us had felt but never dared to put into words. Then he told another story, this time about a woman he once knew. She had spent years being the one everyone leaned on, the one who always put others first. She lost herself in the constant giving, in the never-ending cycle of being needed. Every time she thought about setting a boundary, guilt crept in. What if they think I don't care? What if they leave? So she stayed. She said yes when she wanted to say no. She smiled when she wanted to cry. Until one day, she woke up and didn't recognize herself anymore. The speaker's voice lowered, forcing the audience to listen even more carefully. And then, something happened, he said. His screen had hands frozen over the keyboard. Something inside her had shifted. It wasn't anger or resentment, it was emptiness. She realized she had nothing left to give. And in that moment, she understood the truth. She had spent her entire life being kind to everyone but herself. The speaker paused, scanning the room. She didn't reply, he said. For the first time, she chose herself. The words sent a ripple through the audience. Some looked relieved, others unsettled. It was such a simple act, ignoring a message, but the weight of it was immeasurable. It wasn't just about saying no. It was about breaking a lifelong pattern, about undoing years of self-sacrifice. But just as she thought she was free, something unexpected happened. The very people who had always depended on her kindness, the ones who had taken without ever giving back, noticed her absence. At first, they reached out more frequently. Then, when she didn't respond, their messages changed. Some grew angry, accusing her of being selfish. Others tried to guilt her, reminding her of everything she had done before. They made it clear. They weren't upset because they missed her. They were upset because she was no longer useful to them. The audience sat in stunned silence. The speaker let the moment stretch before he delivered the final blow. And that, he said, is when she finally understood. The people who truly cared about her, they didn't demand. They didn't guilt. They simply respected her choice. For the first time, the tension in the room shifted. Some people nodded, as if seeing their own lives reflected in the story. Others looked deep in thought, perhaps wondering what they might need to walk away from. The speaker took a breath and stepped forward. Kindness should never come at the cost of your own well-being. If it does, then it's not kindness, it's self-neglect. The weight of his words settled over everyone. And then, with a part of the answer, the speaker let the silence linger, giving everyone a moment to sit with their thoughts. Then, with a small nod, he stepped back, his message delivered. No dramatic ending, no easy solution, just a truth that each person had to face on their own. As people slowly began to stir, exchanging glances, I could feel the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just another speech. It was a wake-up call. As I walked out of the auditorium, I found myself wondering, how many times had I mistaken kindness for obligation, and more importantly, what would I do next,